like when I first started preaching, I manuscripted, like I was taught to manuscript. And in my first church setting, the outgoing senior pastor that I interned under, and then the incoming senior pastor, like they were very polished pastors and they manuscripted. So the setting was very much kind of a polished, you had to be pretty polished. And so I manuscripted as well, since I was taught that anyway. But I left that and I became, for a short term, an interim preaching pastor, a small church plant. And I felt the Lord really wanted to kind of move me away from manuscripting. So I use preaching notes now, and it does allow me to be a freer. I mean, you can still use a manuscript and be free, but for me, if I used a manuscript, I wasn't very free. I was free to maybe like add a word or two or phrase or two, or omit a phrase or two. But in terms of like being freer to be able to like park on a point, I wasn't doing it. So I learned how to do that when I started using preaching notes, which is where I'm at now, and have been, and I don't really plan on moving away from that. And then in that regard, in the practicing of preaching, like the sermon or the rehearsing, some people call it the rehearsing, just learning how to do, like how to discern God in all of that, because sometimes God wants you to park on, like your sermon notes, there's A, there's B, but God might want you to park on A, not so much B for this particular community, this group. So just kind of learning to discern the Lord's leading in the rehearsing or practicing of that sermon, so that because now I'm an itinerant preacher, right? So I'm recycling sermons. The odd time I'll write a brand new sermon. But I really don't like to have to write a brand new sermon because I'm a full-time professor and I don't have time for that. So so I recycle, and the recycling just kind of like, okay, what do I sense God wants me to kind of pull out or emphasize more in this particular sermon than these other points. So